Hi everyone, this is Dave from modbunker.com, and today I'm going to show you guys step by step on how to achieve the heat-shrinkless look on a pet sleeve without actually using heat shrink with our conduit sleeve. I developed a pretty simple process that I think even beginners will be able to implement in their own projects, so let's go ahead and get started. So everything that you'll need to do this is right here. We have a Bic lighter, we have a pre-crimped wire. Now this is our conductor 16 gauge wire with our terminal pins. Now this isn't your typical extension setup. As you can see, we have two males, one on each end. Now we'll just be using this wire to make actually one of our PSU jumper plugs for now. Then to the left of that we have some of our neon blue conduit sleeve and just a side flush cutter to cut the sleeve. Okay, so first what we need to do is measure our sleeve to fit our wire. So what we're going to do is grab our pre-crimped wire and our sleeve, and we're just going to put it right up to the wire. Now we're going to want to make the sleeve go right in between where the back of the terminal is here and where the crimp is in the wire. So we're just going to measure it halfway, right in between, and then measure it all the way down, and the same thing on the bottom side. So we're going to want to, and I usually just put my thumb right there where I need to cut. And what I'll do is let go of the terminal, grab my side cutter, and snip right there. So next what we need to do is what I like to call pre-melt the ends here. Now pre-melting, what it does is it keeps the ends of the sleeve from fraying when you're trying to push it onto the wire. So we're just going to grab our lighter here. All we're going to do is simply flash it for a couple seconds on each side, just like that. So you can see it kind of closes the ends there and pre-melts it so it doesn't fray when or catch on the end of the terminal. Okay, so now what we need to do is put the sleeve onto the pre-crimped wire. So all you got to do is grab your sleeve and just put it right over the terminal there. Now I like to use like a slinky method. Just go ahead and grab the part that it's not quite in the wire yet and just push down until it won't go anymore. It seems like it stops right about there. So now what we're going to do is grab the ends and push down so it opens the sleeve, and we're just going to let go to the bottom there. And it's going to push it down for us. I'm just going to keep doing that so we have the sleeve completely on the wire. So now what we want to do is position the sleeve so where it's right in between the middle part of what we mentioned before we want to measure the sleeve at. We have it right in between there. Now it's okay if you get a little bit of fraying on the end like here. We're going to be fixing that in just a second.
But first I'd like to explain a little bit about pet sleeving and its use for heat shrink for the heat-shrinkless method. So pet sleeve is a plastic type of sleeve, and generally it's always been shown to have to use heat shrink for the heat-shrinkless method when you're melting the sleeve to the wire. The main reason for this is because when you introduce heat to plastic, it starts to retract back and away from your heat source. And so what the heat shrink does is it compresses on the sleeve onto the wire and almost tacks the sleeve to the wire for you. So that means you're going to have to buy end stock heat shrink to do it. Now I wanted to find an alternative way without having to use heat shrink and present it in a way that even beginners would be able to do it. So after going through about 20 wires, I got down my technique. So let me go and show you how I do it. Okay, so first what we want to do is close the big hole out at the end. So we're just going to grab our lighter and hold it up to the sleeve for about 5 to 10 seconds until you start to see the sleeve melt back. Then we're going to take our hand and just tack the edges down to the wire. This next step is probably one of the most important steps of the process, and what we want to do is melt a 45-degree slope right after the crimp. Now when the conduit sleeve cools down, it's going to harden really hard, and when you try to pull back on the sleeve, it's not going to budge because the slope is going to be hitting the wire. So turn your wire upside down, put the lighter at a good 45-degree angle just like this, and we're going to melt the slope, and we're just going to push with our finger down over that part in the crimp, and that's going to make our slope. As you can see, it makes a nice little slope, and we're going to touch up on this, but the process is pretty straightforward after this. So all we're going to do is just turn the wire about clockwise and just keep melting around the edges. And we're just going to use our finger. Once we see it melt, we're just going to dab it right into the terminal. Turn some more, do the back side now. And what I recommend doing is blowing on the terminal pin about every other one that you do, because what's hot is actually the terminal pin because it's conducting all that heat from the flame. The sleeve itself isn't very hot. So just keep going around, ensuring to dab inward And what you're also doing is melting the sleeve right by the crimp, so when you put it in the connector, it's not going to catch on the connector and fray. So one great thing about the heat shrinkless method is that it's actually stronger than that of just using heat shrink. When your sleeve cools down, it creates a very strong hold on the wire because it hardens really hard. And of course, heat shrink doesn't harden like this, so it's really hard to pull it off the wire. So this is the look you're aiming for. You can see we have a nice 45-degree slope by the crimp, and you can see it's really low profile, and that's really important because the 16 gauge wire in the sleeve is pretty dense and thick, so we want to make sure it's going to be able to fit inside the connector. So we're going to turn the wire around and just do the same thing to the other side. So again, we're just going to pre-melt the sleeve, tack it down, flip the wire over so we can create that 45-degree slope here. I melted a little too much there. It's okay. Now if you're left-handed, you might want to go in the opposite direction. I'm right-handed, so it's just natural for me to turn the sleeve in a clockwise direction, but it's okay if you do this the other direction too. So one thing you do want to make sure of is that you don't want the sleeve too high up on the terminal, otherwise it's not going to fit inside the connector and it's not going to click in. So if you do have excess, what you can do is just use your side cutter and cut it off and then remelt the sleeve. So this is what they look like when they're finished. And again, this is what you kind of want to go for when you're doing this. Again, it's just going to take a lot of practice. And once you get it, it's actually fairly simple, and you'll be able to do it almost every single time and get it perfect almost every single time. Okay, now it's time to put it to the test, so we're going to try and see if it fits right into the connector. So again, just go ahead and push it in. It may take a little bit of force, but what you should not have is sleeve sticking out of the holes of the connector, and that means that you probably didn't melt all the sleeve down enough, and it's caught, and it grabs and it pulls out the sleeve. But as you can see here, it looks like we're good, so I'm going to go ahead and put the other one in. And you should hear a faint clicking sound. And that clicking sound signifies that you've done it correctly and it's not going to be coming out of that connector. And that about sums up this video. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully you learned something from this, and if you haven't, hopefully it was entertaining for you. Next videos that are going to be coming up, we're going to be making a whole how-to guide on how to make your own extensions from scratch, and also how to use this method but with heat shrink instead. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.